So good afternoon, everybody. So grateful that you took time out to be with us today. And I'm so grateful that we're able to do our annual faculty research celebration. And while I'm at it, why don't I say Happy Seeds Week to you? For those of you that don't know what Seeds Week means, around here we have all these acronyms. SEED stands for Spring Enrichment and Engagement Days. And it's something that we've been doing here at the university during this week for a long time. We're so grateful. But I love this opportunity to show off our research. In particular, this year, it's been so amazing for me because it allows for us to talk about the important contributions of our faculty and all the research, the scholarship, and all the innovation that's going on. But what I like this year is we've added this notion of our student into this process. And then I walk up, lots of you tease me here about talking about us as a research university with a teaching soul. And I walk up and there's this big sign here, the teaching soul. What an amazing thing. For 4 years, we've used this event to focus on our achievements as a Carnegie community engaged university, the gold standard for service among institutions of higher education. First, I want to thank our great colleague from Healy Library, Daniel Ortiz, who's back here. Daniel, give him a round of applause. Thank you for carrying on this tradition as our dean. We're so grateful to you for that. But also to all of the Office of Special Events staff who work to organize and promote this event and this gathering. Thank you so much for everyone who's taken time out of their schedule and lives to be here today. You're going to have a wonderful, behind that door, it's going to be a great reception later on. So we're going to thank those people in advance and to all those who are working so that this can be streamed out throughout the university community. Thank you as well. We rely on all of these folk to keep this tradition alive. Our celebration this year may feature its best theme yet. I've sort of mentioned that already. The teaching soul, research, and mentoring. As you know, I always espouse the importance of mentors because every time I stand here before you, I realize how important it was for me to have all of those human beings in my life who took me under their wing from the first time I arrived in Boston from Pittsburgh to the ones who continue to mentor me here on this campus every day. I'm so grateful for that. Today, not only do we celebrate our faculty's exploration and creativity across the respective disciplines, we also express gratitude for their mentorship of our students who have followed in their footsteps to make discoveries in the field of music, music history, cancer and health, and peace building. Ooh, what a lineup we have today. And our student presenters are particularly special because they each represent our Beacon Student Success Fellowship Program, which supports unpaid, Provost, unpaid. I don't know, Provost, we got to fix that. No, but experiential learning opportunities that are second to none. So grateful for that opportunity through that fellowship program to do that, including internships, service learning, civic engagement projects, mentoring, research projects, and much, much, much more. I hope our presenters today see this annual faculty research collaboration and celebration as a small example of how much we appreciate their expertise in the field. I hope you understand how important you are to this university and how grateful we are to have you here. I know our students appreciate it. I hear it all the time. I know former students appreciate it because I've just come from lunch where that was being espoused. And Rajani, we were told to give a wonderful hello to you from a former honors college student who I had lunch with today. What an amazing thing. The generous way in which our faculty share their talents, passion, and time enable our students to research and learn and participate in activities that shape their interest during college. I would hear about it, I would show up to departments and they would tell me it, but when I hear it from our students. And then I see it in the papers you produce, and you give them an opportunity to be authors or researchers or lead, or I see their posters and I see your imprints on them. What an amazing, amazing opportunity for us. So we look forward to hearing from the 3 faculty members today, but I have to tell you, I also look forward to hearing or witnessing our students in their growth and their development. Then we're going to hear from our faculty role models and how the experiences shape their own quest for learning. After that, we're going to let the mentees step up here and do their thing. First, we're going to hear from Professor Pacey Foster and Joe DeMelo about their work on the Massachusetts Hip Hop Archive. In collaboration with our special collections, Professor Foster actually recorded our first academic history of Boston hip hop, so I'm sure we have much to learn about that genre from the perspective of our Commonwealth as a whole. So Massachusetts has something to do with hip hop. Who would have thought, right? We getting ready to roll up in here. Next, Professor Joe Macoska and Diego Almanza will shed some light on their work on the U54 Minority Institution Cancer Center Participation Partnership, which enables the University of Massachusetts Boston to research cancer health disparities among disenfranchised populations by teaming up with Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center. At the same time, U54 aims to improve research, training, and outreach among underrepresented minority students, fellows, and scientists to help make up such of those disparities. Finally, Professor Alan Stoskopf and Michelle and Sarah Bolden will also discuss their work conducted by our Honors College in Spain. How ironic is that? Just coming from lunch with Honors College folk, ending the day today with some Honors College folk who, last summer they made a trip abroad to lay the foundation for our international community of inquiry with 2 partner universities from Spain. Together, they examined the importance of peace building in the midst of our violent world. We look forward to hearing from all the presenters. But today is about celebrating how our university shares the power of research through our incredible faculty who paved the way for our tremendously talented students to broaden their horizons and to reach their goals. Mentor relationships provide our students with knowledge and training so that they may graduate better prepared to share their communities, the Commonwealth, our nation, and our world. Most importantly of all, our students learn through their mentors the importance of paying it forward. They understand the need to set an example for their peers and for others who come after them, and that is an amazing tradition. It's an amazing value to have. Thank you for that gift and for sharing that gift with those who are coming to fill these spaces that we are sort of paving a path for. So the University of Massachusetts Boston has long held mentor relationships to be an important pillar of our university community, and that is why I'm so pleased we are here to celebrate our teaching soul together today. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us and for all you do on behalf of this university. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Happens to be our Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Winston Langley. Now, Provost Langley loves this day. He loves to show you off. He comes running to my office every time there's a hire. He comes running to my office every time you have some new notion of what we should be sort of developing our scholarship, an area we need to develop our scholarship in, and something we need to take before the Board of Trustees to make sure that we're able to present that kind of opportunity for learning for our students. Comes running to do that. But then, when it turns from paper and listening to him to its reality of you, for me, that's an amazing, amazing thing. And so today I get a chance to bear witness to some of that. And so for that, I'm grateful to our provost And without further ado, I welcome him to the podium. I know he has some words he'd like to share, and then we're going to get into that program. Come on up here, Provost Langley. Thank you.
Well, I'm supposed to say something. I thought that the Chancellor had introduced the entire subject area. And I will introduce colleagues, but I simply want to say that I think hip-hop has had a major impact on our culture, and one could see it in the context of the urban, a feature by which we judge ourselves, both in terms of its creativity, and the urban is supposed to be part of that creativity. It provides the environment for it. It suggests something about the street, what we have always called the street, and sometimes look down on what happens in the street. But out of the street, indeed, many things have been born. And if one were to look at some of the artistic movements that emerged before World War I and continued into World War II, much of Western Europe, etc., were dealing with the street. It had not been so much a part of the American tradition, and we had not perhaps paid enough attention to the street. But the idea of freestyle, the idea of spontaneity that we had associated with jazz, that we could find in many areas we today call classical music. Certainly anybody who knows Chopin knows about the improvisation which defined what he had done. But I think there is something else to hip-hop, apart from its popularity, its being part of the street, apart from its being part of the urban, apart from its almost limitless morphing. And that it teaches us something about, or perhaps is an expression of, physics, the world of physics. That is supposed to teach us something about matter and its motion in time and in place. And how hip-hop, in its popping and locking and floating and gliding, and is indeed part of the physical world and its concerns with energy and force and distance, and what we in fact can accomplish within limited or broader space. And so I find it a particular pleasure in introducing the collaboration between professors and students, Pacey Foster from Management and Marketing, and Joel DeMelo, Chancellor, mentioned from American Studies, a rather able student who is going to tell us something about popular culture, and I hope its relationship to physics.
Okay, so one of my worst fears has come true. Having to follow this man at the podium has just happened to me. Thank you for this wonderful honor, Chancellor, Provost. I don't think any more mellifluous words have ever been spoken about hip hop. Certainly not at this college, this university. So I'm here to talk to you today with Joel DeMelo, my student collaborator, about a story about Boston hip hop and a story about cassette culture and youth culture in the 80s, before hip-hop was an industry, while it was still a youth movement, while it was still a teenage movement. No one in this industry was over their teenage years at this moment when I'm talking about. So it's a youthful moment. It's an innocent moment. And the story I want to tell you is about community curators. That's a term that I'm using for the people who've collected this material, and their college collaborators, and how we've been building the Massachusetts Hip Hop Archive through this community engaged scholarship. You might be wondering what a College of Management professor is up here talking about a digital humanities project for. So that's enough to say that this is a multidisciplinary project. Hip hop is a multidisciplinary endeavor. You know, it sources from many different places. So this began for me in before 2009, when I was asked to write a book chapter on the history of Boston hip hop called Hip Hop in the Hub: How Boston Rap Remained Underground. And it was a chapter as much about how there were lack of opportunities here for many of the people coming up rather than opportunities themselves because of the industry here, because of the structure of the industry and the structure of the community. So as part of that work, I was asked to do this as a management scholar because I happened to know one of the people who started the first rap shows in Boston to play local tapes, named Magnus Johnstone. He was an old friend of mine. And so people approached me to write this chapter because they'd heard the story of Lekos Lemma, one of this early radio show, and Magnus Johnstone and his legend. So let me tell you just a little bit about the background, and then I'll get out of the way and let him, the real star, talk about it. Okay. Magnus Johnstone was a painter. He was an artist. He was a musical omnivore. He was always ahead of the curve. He was hearing stuff as it happened and had been doing a reggae show on WMBR in Cambridge. And so he was used to having community members come in and toast on the air, perform live, share their recordings. He was very community-minded. Reggae at that time was taking a digital turn. It was going from roots to dance hall, and he didn't love that turn, and he was starting to look for something else. His ears were always open to the next thing, and when he heard rap music, he got it immediately. He caught it. He caught the bug. A little older than the folks that were making it, but he realized that there was a great opportunity here, and he started filling in on a show called The Ghetto, which was an urban music show, a dance music show, on WMBR. And when he would fill in, he would start playing these rap records, these electro records. And without even announcing who he was, the kids would call in and say, "Magnus, we love it, keep it going, keep it going." So he knew there was an audience there, a teenage audience, who wasn't able to hear this stuff anywhere else on the airwaves in Boston at that time. It was the only place where you could hear it. So it became a beacon. It became a tractor beam that drew these kids in. And of course, he recognized the power of that. And so he began inviting them down and soliciting tapes. And by December of '85, he had this kind of wild little clubhouse of youthful teenage kids coming from all of Metro Boston to share their tapes, talk about their stories, tell the stories about their neighborhoods and their battles and their loves and their joys and their shows. Fast forward, partly because of this youthful exuberance, the show was not renewed for its second year at WMBR. You know, there was some slightly coarse language here and there. There were kids on the air let loose, really. And so things happen when you do such a thing. So he moved his show to WZBC, where it continued until 1988, when he felt that hip-hop he'd done his hip-hop thing. Hip-hop was just beginning at that point to reach a mass market audience, and Magnus was already on to other things. Fast forward a little more, and he eventually moved up to Maine and took with him what was rumored to be this amazing collection of the first show in Boston to really focus on local artists. No one had ever seen this collection, no one had ever heard it, and it sat in Maine, apparently, for years and years. Until I was asked to write this chapter, and so of course I decided, let me go visit him. And as it turns out, the legend was true. He had indeed kept an incredible collection of demo tapes, 300 of them or so, made by teenage artists, including the young guru, then called Keith Elam, son of a very prominent black family in town, who went and then moved to New York and changed hip-hop with Premier and all of the work that he did under Gangstar. That started here. And so Magnus was one of the first people to give him exposure. Same thing with the almighty RSO. All their tapes were in these boxes. And I mean, this was a moment when I realized, despite being a marketing and management colleague, I think I'd found my life's work. So I knew that I had to pursue this somehow, and that began this story. The one thing that became clear as well is that despite his best efforts to keep the tapes of the students and the kids that had sent stuff to him, he didn't actually record his own show. So that began a second round, and part of the reason was he was too busy doing the show, frankly, to record it. So he had no tapes of the show, which meant no interviews of the kids, no live performances, all of that. What else was he playing? All we had was the demo tapes, good, but not the complete record. So again, began a search through the community, asking DJs, asking friends, who's got a tape, who's got a tape? Almost no one had any, except for this one character, Willie Loco Alexander, a peer of his, a friend of his, who, like Magnus, recognized the power of this music as it was happening and sat at home and, despite Magnus not knowing that he had done this, recorded some 200 tapes of the show itself. So now we have this incredible collection of both the demo tapes and the tapes of the show that they appeared on. And that's when I decided to write a grant to the President's Creative Economy Fund, because I realized this is really quite an amazing story about Boston and about hip hop, about cassette culture, about community creators enabled by this college radio station and this curator who loved them. And that's when I met Joel. So at this point, I needed a lieutenant to help me with this, and I reached out to Rachel Rubin, actually, who had been teaching a class on hip hop, and I said, send me your best student. I've got a project that is a really special one, and I need your best. And this is who she sent me. And so Joel worked with us in 2014 and 15 under this President's Creative Economy Grant. He helped us index the first tapes. He helped us draft a grant to the Grammy Foundation, which we didn't quite get, but it's okay. We still got some funding from the Boston Public Library to complete it, and we are moving on. And most importantly, what we're here to celebrate today, he identified this wonderful Beacon Student Success Fellowship opportunity and then took this work and continued it. So let me hand it over to Joel.
Thanks, Pace. Thanks, guys. Thank you. So before I get into the exact project, I think it's important to note, like, one thing that we kind of learned digitizing the tapes, like when we worked on that the summer before this, and going through all these artist demos and seeing what all these kids had done, it was so vivid to us just how broad, like, the scope of what they were doing was, and how creative they were, and how important it was that, like, we kept the community involved in this, and that it wasn't just a strictly academic project, that we made sure we kept the community engaged. And so eventually I'm lucky to be a member of the Honors College, and Rajni and her lieutenants sent an email out offering this opportunity for a grant money, and I saw this and I was like, we could use this, and we can do something with this. And sure enough, we applied, and we were lucky enough to get it. And we had been working with this artist, Killer DJ, who's a legend around here. He's been producing records and DJing live since the mid '80s, and but he never really got his break. Like so many artists in Boston, especially hip-hop artists, it's really difficult to break through. There's a lot of rock clubs, not a lot of places that will, allow hip-hop performers in. So it's really difficult, and he never really was able to break through like that. But we'd been working with him, interviewing him, learning, about his story in the industry and what he'd accomplished. And he'd always told us about this record that he had put out with his friend Kevin Lowe, just something that he thought it was, the holy grail of his over, and it was called Jordan. And it was just a single that he made, and it was a tribute to Michael Jordan, which, as a diehard, lifelong Chicago Bulls fan, I was already, Pacey was telling me this, I was sold, completely sold. So when we saw this grant, we were like, this would be perfect as an opportunity to, find this track that Killer, made so many years ago, and, reissue it, kind of bring it back into the public eye, see what we can do with it. So we got the grant, and at that point, we had to go out and find the track, because Killer, incredibly, did not have it. He hadn't heard it in decades. He had no clue. The only real lead we had was that his manager, Bobby, might have a copy somewhere. And we heard stories about a safe that might have a bunch of unplayed copies. Like, this is really, kind of crazy apocryphal stuff. That kind of fell through, and eventually we got a hold from a truck that Bobby owned of a cassette copy of the song, which was a relief. We finally, had what we needed. And at that point, everything kind of moved forward pretty quickly. I researched pressing plants for vinyl records, tried to find the cheapest option that was local so that shipping wouldn't be too much money, of course. And kind of, a big step for us was getting the tape remastered, because obviously, I'm sure most of cassettes don't sound great, especially not when they're 25 years old. So we were lucky enough to have Jason Bittner from Traffic Entertainment do a pro bono remastering job for us, so the record sounds good as ever. And yeah, so at that point, we picked a pressing plant. We've got copies right here. We replicated the original label of the 12-inch single, just the same font, the misspelling of Porsche on the, well, it's up there, so y'all can see it. But yeah, so that was kind of, at that point, we handed the 7 inches over to Killer. We pressed 300 of them. And we basically, in doing this, wanted to just provide him with something that he could use as a tool, himself. He could really kind of own it and choose how he wanted to distribute it, use it as a promotional tool, send it to stores. And he's been selling them for good money and doing really well with them. And it's been kind of great for him to kind of, put something back out there. I mean, he hasn't put out a physical release on his own, I think, since something like 1995, I think. He did something with a friend of his. So it was kind of a big thing, and it was really an honor to get to give that to him. It was a really powerful moment. And it was just an incredible experience to get to, kind of take part in the record industry in this kind of small way and learn about not only how to put out a record and how to, promote, a piece of music and all this, but just to figure out a way to make it a community project and not just, obviously we haven't made any money off of this. And, it's been a way for us to kind of thank the people who have given us something that's so dear to our hearts and to learn more about how they've done it and to, start a dialogue between, artists and us as kind of people, from the academic sphere who are kind of researching and archiving this material that aren't necessarily, producing it on a daily basis, as our life's work. So it's kind of, yeah, it was really an incredible project, and it continues to kind of bear fruit as Killer, continues to sell them and work on them. So I'll pass it back to Pacey to kind of close.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Joel. So what next? Joel has added this piece to this story, and the story goes on. So we now are almost done with the digitization of the Lekos Lemma collection. The Killer DJ piece is now part of that. We have got funding from the Boston Public Library to do the second half. We're launching it through Open Archives in the fall. We're going to continue to engage the community, both the academic community and the local community, developing some advisory boards for that. We're looking very likely to bring in a summer intern in 2016. And we're going to continue fundraising, do partnerships, maybe do some future acquisitions, and continue to research and publish out this. So let me just conclude with a couple of thank yous. First of all, thank you to the Chancellor and to the Provost for this wonderful opportunity, and to Daniel Ortiz at the library for making this possible, to Joanne Riley as well, and Andrew Elder over at the Special Collections, to all the folks over at the Beacon Student Success Fellowship. This has just really been an amazing opportunity for my project, and I think for Joel, and for me as a mentor, and for Joel as a mentee. I think we've learned an enormous amount. To Ed Beard and the President's Office for recognizing this when no one else really did. You saw the idea in this when nobody else saw it, and so thank you. You were the seed funding, and I hope I've done well with it. Most importantly, to Magnus and Willie. Magnus passed on about 3 years ago, so he never saw this actually come to fruition. And when he was making his final arrangements, I promised him that no matter what happened in my life, I would make sure that these tapes were safe and they were given back to the world, which is what he wanted. And so to all the Boston hip-hop folks and Boston hip-hop community who've entrusted your most precious creations with this somewhat strange custodian, thank you. Thank you. I can assure you that your tapes are safe. They're safe forever, and they're going to be given out to the world just like Magnus would have wanted. So thank you all for coming. Thanks.
And now for something completely different. Thank you so much for this honor. I feel honored, and I especially am very pleased that Diego is going to be able to tell you what he's been doing in my lab, actually for the last couple of years. But I want to share a story with you first about Diego, because I think Diego is really an extraordinary young man. Diego came here with his family from Peru when he was 12. And you can see there his mom, his dad, himself, and his little brother. And in just a few short years, he has actually managed to have quite an impact on my lab, and I think actually on the university, and certainly has propelled his own career forward, probably in a way that he didn't realize would happen when he first walked through the doors at UMass Boston. And so he's become very integrated with the community. On the far right, you can see Diego. Next to Dr. Jose Rodriguez Nieves, who is here, who is a postdoc in my lab, former grad student, who really took Diego under his arm and showed him not just laboratory research, but also how to be a scientist in many ways. You can also see on the bottom that Diego, with others, has participated in a lot of activities here at UMass Boston. This is just from a couple weeks ago at the SACNAS, New England SACNAS conference that was here, where Diego presented with some of his colleagues. Diego's done really well. So when he graduates soon, he will be graduating with an honors in biology, distinction in biology, special award for excellence in research in biology. He has presented his research at several conferences, as you'll see later. He's now going to go on to the Broad Genomics Science Scholars Post-Baccalaureate Program. The Broad Institute, as you may know, is a collaborative arrangement between Harvard and MIT that does a lot of very high-level sequencing and genome analysis. And he wants to join a doctoral program in the life sciences when he's finished with all that, which I'm sure he'll be able to do. So this is kind of a sketch of what Diego has done since he arrived. In January 29th, 2014, I know this because I still have the email, believe it or not, he responded to an ad I'd put in for a lab manager. I just wanted someone to come in the lab, some work study student, to do some ordering for us, clean glassware, that kind of stuff. So it became pretty apparent that Diego could do a lot more than that. And so soon after he came in, he started helping Dr. Nazi Kermani, who's sitting back there, with a mouse project we had, feeding mice high-fat and low-fat diets. And we had several kind of phenotypes we wanted to look at consequent to that. But you can see the mice there. The one on the high-fat diet is pretty apparent. It's twice as big as the one on the low-fat diet. And so while he was doing that, he helped Amy Avery in our genomics core optimize our RNA sequencing protocols and programmed our robot, which is right there, to be able to do libraries for sequencing. This was kind of like a little summer project for him. After that, and during that, he helped Dr. Kermani isolated and prepped the RNA from the livers of those mice, and you can see them here. The one on the right has a fatty liver. That's the high-fat diet-fed mouse. The one on the left has a normal liver. He's going to spend a lot of time talking to you about those because once that was sequenced, Diego basically taught himself a computer language called R and figured out how to analyze the RNA sequences. This is no small feat, okay? He had some help from Todd Riley, who's a bioinformatics professor in biology, but he really sat there and kind of did this himself. And I was constantly surprised at how much he was producing. And while he was doing that, he also helped Dr. Rodriguez Nieves with studies to revise a scientific manuscript and was in the lab doing Western blots and all kinds of stuff like that. So he had multiple things going on over the 2 short years while he was with me. And he's been very productive. So he will get a manuscript out of his work, which he's going to talk to you about in a minute. But you can see here he's had several presentations, the Summer Research Symposium, the Fall Symposium. He went to Seattle for an annual biomedical research conference for minority students. He just presented at SACNAS a couple weeks ago, like I told you. And he has amassed I think, pretty long list of honors and awards. So he has several scholarships, the Mass High Demand Scholarship, John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, Charles Hoff Scholarship, Academic Recognition Award, Follett Corporation Scholarship. He was a U54 summer intern. He is obviously a Beacon Student Success Fellow. He has a Sanofi Genzyme Undergraduate Research Fellowship, and he got a travel award from Tufts University to go to that conference in Seattle. So, and he's only an undergrad. And so, how does this happen? Well, it clearly doesn't happen by chance, but I really think, and this is the mentoring part, that it really takes a village, okay, to quote our perhaps next president, Hillary Rodham Clinton. We need to mentor our students, and this requires a cooperative effort. It's not just one person. Obviously, there's classroom preparation. Professors need to make the classroom material kind of come alive to students so that they are interested in that. It takes a lot of positive peer interactions, which I think we kind of forget about. You know, Diego has friends who are kind of following the same path, and they hang together, and they encourage each other, and I think that's really important. And I think in the laboratory environment, whatever environment the professor has, those positive interactions need to be reinforced. Jose has had a tremendous influence on Diego. And you know, that comes from having a positive kind of interaction and positive outlook. Career guidance, that's important. He's gotten that from me, from Jose, from a lot of people here at UMass Boston. And that, in the formative years, I think has to happen. And the one-on-one interest and interactions, okay? It needs to be enforced that if we want our students to be successful, we gotta talk to them outside the classroom. We gotta interact with them a lot. And that's really going to have them put out their best effort. And that's a positive reflection on all of us. So I'm going to be quiet now and let Diego tell you everything that he's been accomplishing with this project.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you to the Chancellor and the Provost. So today, I'm Diego Almanza. I'm a major in biology. Did my work under the supervision of Joe Macoska. My project that I've been working on for about a year and a half now is about RNA-seq analysis of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease induced by metabolic syndrome in a mouse model. So what is metabolic syndrome? Metabolic syndrome is actually a cluster of conditions which include blood pressure, low blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess body fat around the waist, abnormal cholesterol or triglyceride levels. This metabolic syndrome is closely linked to obesity and lack of physical activity. And it's becoming more common due to the rise of obesity rates among adults. So my focus of my research was how does metabolic syndrome can affect the liver? So the liver plays an important role in the body. It is able to do protein production, blood clotting, metabolism of cholesterol, glucose, and iron. And this is stuff that the body needs to stay alive and healthy. So metabolic syndrome can affect this, can affect the liver, and can compromise the liver from normal function in the body. And some of the diseases that are caused by metabolic syndrome that affects the liver function is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is my main focus of my project, along with hepatitis and cirrhosis. And why my main focus was non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was because this is a precursor to much worse prognosis like hepatitis and cirrhosis, and ultimately hepatocellular carcinoma, which is liver cancer. So on your right, you can see a fatty liver from a high-fat diet mouse. I don't know if you can see the mouse, but this is white adipose tissue or fat. And on here we can observe also the low-fat diet mouse, which is a normal liver compared to the high-fat diet. So how does white adipose tissue or fat affect the organism? So some white adipose tissue it's fine for an organism, but an abnormal amount of white adipose tissue can lead to like inflammation, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and also non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So what is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? It's actually the buildup of extra fat in liver cells that is not caused by alcohol. It is normal for liver to contain some fat, but more than 5 to 10% of fat of the liver's weight, then we call that fatty liver or steatosis. So understanding the transcriptance of non-fatty versus fatty liver disease might shed light on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease pathobiology and facilitate new therapeutic approaches. here we can observe pathology cross-section of a liver, and we can observe a lot of white matter, and this is actually fat on high-fat diet liver. And in the bottom, we observe low-fat diet mouse liver. So we took 3 samples from a high-fat mouse and then 3 samples from low-fat mouse, and we wanted to see the differences between the transcriptome that leads to the genes and ultimately the production of protein that play a huge role in different signaling pathways. So we wanted to observe what are the differences between these 2 phenotypes. So we took mouse, high-fat mouse, and then low-fat mouse. You can clearly observe which one here is a big one. And we did 2 approaches to our sequencing. We did RNA-seq, and we did also did an mRNA panel, which has the mRNA information panel is very specific for transcripts for genes that are only have some connection to inflammation. On RNA-seq, we can look at the whole gene transcripts, and we can really observe genes that are outside inflammation. And then we do data analysis. This is where our skills came into play, and a lot of other tools that I use to find the differences between these 2 phenotypes. And then ultimately, this will lead into some in vitro validation, which for targets and hopefully better therapeutic approaches to diagnosing this. So although the 2 techniques are very different from each other, RNA-seq and then nanostring information panel, we're able to show a correlation between the 2 gene transcripts, between the 2 different techniques and the same genes. And so this was very encouraging to see that our techniques, our methods that we're following are actually very consistent. And what was something striking that I found was that there's a strong upregulation of immune-related response in a high-fat mouse compared to a low-fat mouse. And the upregulation of these genes that are correlated to immune response reflects a metabolic syndrome-induced inflammation. On the other hand, I looked also at the downregulated transcripts in high-fat mouse, and we found a lot of metabolic processes were downregulated, and this reflects the fatty liver organ dysfunction. So this was very interesting to see. And also I wanted to see if there's any correlation between non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and hepatocellular carcinoma. So I went to the literature and find transcripts that have been validated and as markers for hepatocellular carcinoma. And we want to compare this to our non-alcoholic fatty liver disease transcripts that we found. It was striking to find some of these that are correlated pretty well between hepatocellular carcinoma and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But one thing to note is that our mouse did not show any tumors. So these mouse did not have cancer per se, but they show these transcripts that are able to be upregulated in the same manner as it's found in hepatocellular carcinoma. Therefore, the mouse fatty liver presents a pre-malignant signature consistent with early stages of tumor reogenesis. So that was my research, my project. So how does that have an effect on me personally? So I will talk about my research and how it has developed critical skills for me. And some of the skills that I developed throughout my 2 years doing research are interpersonal skills. Those have helped me succeed in different opportunities here and outside campus. Also, critical thinking skills. I had a lot of networking opportunities going to different conferences and meeting a lot of people outside of the institution and inside here as well. Also, being able to have a lot of professional development opportunities here in school, and it has helped me expand my creativity, and it has helped me think outside the box, really. And also, research has really helped me decide my career choice. Not a lot of people know, but before I was actually focused on being a physician assistant prior to coming into Joe Macoska's lab. And that changed completely, and now I really want to get my doctorate degree someday in the future. So career in research that promotes the creativity and is aligned with my own interests seemed like a better fit to me. And also the mentors that I've been able to have throughout the years, especially Dr. Macoska, which is my principal investigator, has allowed me to have a great appreciation towards the need for research. And ultimately, the more important point that I want to make is that research has a great impact in population and community. And that is a very rewarding experience to me. And I like that feeling that someday in the future, I might make a difference in therapeutics or treatment or screening methods or different diseases. So I just want to close out with saying acknowledgments to a few different people. So obviously, Dr. Joe Macoska has helped me a lot. And also, Dr. Rodriguez Nieves has been a mentor since I got into the lab. And his ways of teaching me and mentoring me has really allowed me to excel in my career. Also, Dr. Kermani, she has been a critical help in this project before I even came on board with her to take on this project. And also the IMSD for providing funding throughout the year for me to be able to do this and keep my creativity going. And also the Beacons, the Student Success Fellowship, and also U54 for allowing me to be here and allowing for the funding that has helped me get my project going. So thank you, everyone.
Well, we have really 3 different presentations. We've talked the real range. Here we go. I'm being joined by Sarah Bolden and Michelle Chouinard, who I hope joins us in a minute. She got called out for a special family matter. But we're speaking about a really interesting trip we took in a project entitled Planning a Human Rights and Peace Building Initiative between UMass Boston and Spanish universities. I wanted to talk for a couple of minutes just to frame it, but really have Sarah talk about the meaning making she had out of the trip and why we think it's significant. So the purpose of our trip to Spain was to help lay the foundation for an international community of inquiry between UMass Boston faculty and students and our counterparts at Autónoma and Deusto universities in Madrid and Bilbao. The concept of a community of inquiry transcends fixed boundaries. It encourages groups of committed learners to explore across disciplines and national borders vital questions that have shaped our lives in the past and today. In our case, a community of inquiry would focus on human rights and peace building, a topic of obvious relevance in a world where political violence and war is all too common, where its effects touch the lives of combatants, refugees, and families, and all of us in profound and human ways. The trip we took together was one of the first steps in finding out what a partnership could look like with our Spanish colleagues. The idea for the trip emerged out of a course I first taught in the Honors College in the fall of 2014. The course was entitled Narratives of War and Peace in a Changing World: How Civic Identities Are Shaped by the Ways We Learn History. This, of course, allowed students to practice their own research and writing skills based in part on the data of an actual international research project where I'm co-PI on. In the project, an international team of researchers are investigating how narratives of war and peace and political violence are represented in national history textbooks in Spain, the United States, and Colombia, and in turn, how those narratives are interrogated and taught by teachers in those countries. In conversation with the Dean of the Honors College, Rajani Srikanth, we thought it was important to have students from my class not only meet with the Spanish members of the research team I work with, but also have the opportunity to help us plan a collaborative between UMass Boston and our Spanish colleagues focused on examining peace building and human rights efforts around the world. Sarah and Michelle were chosen for the trip based on their strong interest in the course content and the quality of the work they did in the course. After having taken this class and become familiar with the research project, Sarah and Michelle were well positioned to provide us with important insights, what might work best or not work so well, with the types of partnerships we might create with our colleagues in Madrid and Bilbao. In addition, they would get to know and get to see how our Spanish colleagues approached human rights and peace-building issues from a variety of perspectives, experience some of the logistical and institutional challenges in creating a partnership, and understand the importance of building working and trusting relationships with our Spanish colleagues, if in fact a community of inquiry could be created and sustained over time. I think we can say that after 10 days in Spain together, we learned a lot about the opportunities and the challenges involved in building such an initiative. We also appreciated the knowledge that emerged from the professional and personal relationships we developed with our hosts on the trip. This trip has resulted in discussions that we hope will link the Honors College with the William Joyner Institute for the Study of War and Social Consequences in the planning of a symposium that would take place in June 2017. Some faculty, teachers, and student representatives from Spain would be invited to UMass Boston to attend part of the annual Joyner Institute Writers' Workshop, and then participate in a 2-day symposium on human rights and peace building with some of our own faculty and students, as well as with Boston area high school teachers who I'm working with at the moment. At this point, though, I think it's more important for you to hear from Sarah on what the trip meant to her and her own learning, and then I'll conclude with a few comments.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a senior here at UMass Boston. I am double majoring in Spanish and sociology, so this trip was clearly very relevant to me. And I'm actually minoring in women's and gender studies. So I was incredibly excited to be taking Alan's class even before receiving the offer to go to Spain with him. In his course, we analyzed historical narratives of war and peace. So in other words, what we did is we really took a very close look at how power dynamics influence which stories are getting told, and perhaps more importantly, which stories aren't getting told, which stories are being silenced. So I'm actually myself studying to become a professor one day, and something I have personally always struggled with is this so-called ivory tower of academia, and these challenges that academics very often face when trying to bridge this gap between theory and practice. How do we take what we're doing in the classroom and put it out there in the real world? And so what I really enjoyed about Alan's class was that it really started to bridge this gap. So the course material that we were studying lent itself to contemporary activism by giving voice to these narratives that go very often silenced. So we talked about the Trail of Tears, we talked about the abolition movement, we talked about events as recent as 9/11, and narratives that aren't getting told in things like history textbooks. So really throughout the semester, we challenged quite relentlessly representations of history that are often taken for granted. And this framework, this community of inquiry, as Alan puts it, it certainly followed us to Spain. So while we were in Spain, we networked with a number of universities, museums, and activist organizations. All of these groups are dedicated to giving voice to these silenced narratives in the pursuit of human rights activism. And we definitely felt the presence of this activism everywhere we went. So for example, this sign was hanging up in Autónoma University as part of a series of signs made by students, and it roughly translates into rights that are not defended are lost. So we felt that present everywhere we went. There's a photo of us with one of the activists we met with. It was very hot in Spain. But really, so I want to focus on one specific moment on our trip, one specific experience. And this was when we went to the Astra factory. So this is in Guernica, which is in the Basque Country in Spain. And believe it or not, this building was actually a weapons manufacturing company that made guns during the Spanish Civil War. You wouldn't think by looking at it because it's actually been transformed into a center that holds events for the community. So while we were there, we walked through this building and we saw all kinds of art throughout the center, and it was very distinctly political art. It emphasized feminism, as you can see by one of those sort of spray painting projects up there. It emphasized politics, it emphasized, anti-war and pro-peace sentiments, and it really clearly emphasized this profound sense of collectivism. And so, in other words, the Astra factory, which was once a symbol of violence, has been transformed into a very deeply symbolic space of healing. And the community center really gives voice to those who have been silenced during the Spanish Civil War and the Basque conflict. Experiences like our visit to the Astra factory have demonstrated to me personally not only the power of grassroots activism, but the power that activists have, or that academics rather, have to start to deconstruct this so-called ivory tower that I mentioned. By bringing experiences like this to students, Whether it's in the classroom or through hands-on travel experiences such as ours, educators can truly work to amplify the voices of those who have been historically silenced. This, to me, is a very powerful and transformative form of activism. So in many ways, this trip has pushed me to actually take a different route with my own studies. I was very adamant about studying sociology in grad school, came back, took a year. I'm now going to be pursuing my master's degree in communication and rhetorical studies. I've really come to believe that rhetorical analysis can help reveal the power dynamics that truly influence and shape our everyday lives. And it allows us to sort of reconstruct these mainstream narratives that we take for granted. And I think that's, for me, something our trip to Spain really demonstrated. And so unfortunately, Michelle was called away on a personal emergency. So my presentation's not as long as it would have been. But we've got photos from the Guernica Peace Museum, which is a museum, again, that speaks towards giving voice to those who have been silenced. This is us with a community activist group that, once again, is working to sort of collect historical records about the Spanish Civil War and the Basque conflict. And Michelle, she is a double major in anthropology and women's and gender studies, pursuing a minor in human rights. So I just want to point out that this trip was no doubt deeply meaningful for her as well, as she's about to pursue her master's degree in human rights. So I'm going to turn it back over to Alan. Thank you.
And some of us will realize that Guernica was a site of massive carpet bombing during 1937, which was a prelude to World War II. Franco's troops used the Legion Condor fighters, the Luftwaffe, to bomb innocent men and women and children. And what was an experience, it wasn't just an intellectual engagement, it was an emotional and an ethical encounter with history. And to meet some of the people who survived that, to see the Peace Museum that they have there, and to really also appreciate that they're converting what was a really traumatic, searing event that tore apart the community. They're healing through workshops and institutes and trying to reach out with other universities. And how do we confront the legacies of war in a way where we do not turn victim into victimizer? And those are powerful moments. I don't know how you quantify that, but I think it does kind of transcend or intersect, if you will, with the whole notion of community across borders. And I want to thank you, especially for Rajani and the whole staff at the Honors College for supporting this effort, Office of Global Programs for helping support my travel there, obviously the Beacon Student Fellowship Program for supporting Michelle and Sarah. And the work we did there really has laid a foundation, and currently we're applying for some grants with the Massachusetts Foundation for Humanities and Work. I plan to bring together different departments, especially Honors College and the Chouinard Institute. So thanks a lot for coming.
Certainly you can see the manner in which certain of the developments at the university, that of the archives and hip-hop, that of the research engagement of our students, and the transformation of career interest and career paths and commitment to a broader community, transformation of an interest on the part of our professor who got involved in the hip-hop effort. And now we have an effort on the part of those who are interested in peace as part of a recognized and dear value within society, the experiences abroad, the commitment of a student to human rights regime effort, and the work and collaboration between and amongst different units of the university life. I think this is remarkable for the university, and this is something that is not always seen and understood, but it's part of the sharing with the rest of the community of many other activities which define our lives on this campus. I'll just add my thanks also to the students and the faculty and members of our libraries for the perhaps giving full expression to the someone here earlier say that it takes a village. I think you mentioned it, Jill, and I think that's part of the Chancellor's position and building relationships across every cleavage we can find, as it were. And to the extent the university continues to represent this, I think we're going to be very, very good at what we do.
So thank you.
The next one.